Okay, everyone, I'd like to welcome Brian Doyle, president and founder of Doyle Salewski, Inc., a licensed insolvency trustee. Okay, Brian, please tell everyone what you do.
Well, I am a chartered accountant, private investigator, certified fraud examiner, and a licensed insolvency trustee. So I own Doyle Salewski, which we're 34 people working in Ontario and Quebec, and we work extensively through both provinces. As licensed insolvency trustees, as I said, and we deal probably 75% with individuals with financial issues, and the other 25% of our work is with corporations. And we like to restructure corporations. We also like to restructure individuals. And 75% of the work we do right now with individuals is consumer proposals under the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, which was remediated in 2009, became easier to do. And on the corporate side, we do a lot of proposals under the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act as well. And we like to keep companies in business. That's one of our mottos.
That's good. So just so the viewers at home know, so 75% of his business is individuals, retail, people. The other 25% is businesses, corporations.
That's right.
And he would like to keep the corporations alive, so it keeps people working and keeps the business going. And one of the things I want to touch base on is that when you said individuals, there's a stat that I saw, there's an uptick on individuals who are come to see trustees and they own homes or they own property compared to the past that was not a thing, maybe 10 years ago or something like that. Is there anything you could touch base on that you noticed?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's for sure. Since, I don't know, I've started watching the economy since probably 2015, 2016, and I've gathered a group of smart people who meet with me once a week for 90 minutes and talk about the economy. Macroeconomics is now my, let's say, hobby.
Yes.
And I became very concerned about where we were going with the debt being increased, particularly in the United States. I mean, they went from 880 billion in the Federal Reserve printing money to almost 9 trillion in a very short period of time, probably 13 years. And the federal debt for the U.S. government is now over $37 trillion. And everybody goes, what's a trillion? Well, take a look at what a trillion is. It is massive. It's unbelievable. And people just don't understand where we are right now in terms of the economy. And it's gotten worse, of course. So as more money printing occurs, inflation ensues, and it becomes more difficult for the lower 50% of our income ladder to make ends meet. And in the last, 4 years, I think food, energy, and shelter went up 35%, which is not reflected in the Consumer Price Index, the CPI, is it? The CPI also includes how TVs have gone down and other gadgets, right? Well, not everybody can afford to buy a new TV, and they may buy one every 10 or 15 years, but you buy food, energy, and you pay for your mortgage, you pay your rent every month, right? And that has gone up drastically, and we're all feeling that pinch. And now that the tariffs are in, it's made it worse.
Yeah, you're seeing on the ground floor. So just so like everyone knows, he said 35% on average. So if you're talking about food, which you can't get away from paying for food, everyone has to eat. And then there's the utilities. So if your budget was $3,000 a month just on food and energy or utilities, now it's closer to $4,000, over $4,000. That's a huge increase. Then you're talking about the cost of interest rates have been going up. So you see people now, the rates have gone up. And everyone's okay to survive a couple months. But once you go past those couple months, people are starting to feel the pinch.
So as inflation increased and prices went up, a lot of people who own houses now have not been able to make their budgets balance on food, energy, and shelter, and have been loading up their credit cards. So now they're contacting trustees for help. And we can solve the debt problem, but we can't solve the income and expense problem, because how do you make more money? Well, that's something you're going to have to solve. And cutting expenses is one thing, and that can always be done. But, you know, people are today right strapped to the wall, so to speak. And it's just so difficult, especially for seniors. You know, they're on fixed pensions they get a modest increase every year, but nothing that competes with inflation, right? So it's hard. It's hard for a lot of seniors and the young people too. So parents with families, you know, the kids have got to eat, they've got to have school. I just went over with Frank here the costs of keeping a kid in hockey. Like my grandson, Nathan, very proud of the kid, 11 years old, he's a real tiger. But I think the hockey registration fee for extramural is $6,000 this year. And that doesn't include equipment. It doesn't include going every weekend to travel and the hotels and the food. It's a huge expense for a lot of parents. So, and we're seeing all of this all over the place now. And I went to Canadian Tire in the weekend. I looked at basic stuff that has gone up $3, $4, $5. You know, like really? And that's more than 20, 30% too. And I don't know if that's a reaction to the tariffs or what, but prices are up. And we're accepting them. We're seeing them. But boy, oh boy, most people are running out of money.
Because you're on the front line, so I could probably ask you this question that would make sense. So when we're talking about unsecured debt, this is mostly credit cards and lines of credits that are not secured on, let's say, a vehicle or a home. The unsecured debt, when you have two types of people, the people own properties and the people don't own properties. Is there a difference? Do you notice a difference in their debt? Do you notice the access to credit is more with the person who owns a property versus the person who doesn't own a property, and thus they have more debt? Like, do you think, like, I don't know, like one will have on average 30% more debt because they have access to 30% more debt? Or
that's a good point. I haven't thought of it that way, because the substantial majority in the past of those who have come to see us have been renters, right? With the odd homeowner. Now, of course, more homeowners in the mix because they can't afford to pay food, energy, and shelter, and they load up their credit cards every month to make ends meet. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense that those with a home with equity, however small that is, would be able to get more credit and a higher credit line than one who's simply a renter, right? But it's up to each individual credit card agency that the debtor does business with. And I remember back, and we're talking 20 years ago, a taxi driver in Scarborough, he had $200,000 of credit cards owing when he came to see us. It was incredible. And he was...
How did he build that kind of credit?
Well, he was kiting, and he was doing things that he wasn't supposed to do, right? And he was paying off one credit card with the other credit card and applying for another credit card and not being honest with his applications. So this happens. Mm-hmm. So it depends.
Just so like viewers at home know, kiting is a form of fraud, right?
That's right.
And it's where...
Well, I wouldn't call it a form of fraud per se. I mean, you can do a certain amount of kiting without, you get a cash advance from your credit card to pay off an overdue credit card, and there might be a temporary situation to get you through. There's nothing in the law that says you can't do that, right?
Yeah.
But if you persist in that, the credit card companies get wind of it and they'll cut you off.
Yeah. So it's like when you bounce around one card to the other card to the other card, and so you basically never pay off your balance. You just always have a balance moving from...
And that's fine as long as you can keep going and pay the bills. But at some point it explodes, right? You just can't do it because the credit card balances now are running at up to 28% interest. Like, that's huge. Mm-hmm. And, it's not uncommon to see people now with $75,000, $100,000, $150,000 of credit cards, right? And then when you break down to them what they're paying every month just in interest, not getting ahead with the principal, I mean, the math is there. They just can't get out of that. And that's why we always push people to see us sooner than later, because you don't want to get into that debt spiral.
The debt spiral is very bad. And I want to touch more on the debt as well. So there's credit card debt, and there's lines of credits and unsecured lines of credits. And there's also, I'm hearing that there's a lot more a CRA debt as well. That's another one that you guys are seeing often, or and it could be, it can vary. The amounts can vary. It could be like a $3,000 debt, or it could be like a $300,000 debt. So the amounts vary, and that's included in the uptick of debt. Is that also like when you see people with lines of credits, credit card debts, and do you see also the same person usually have a CRA debt as well? Like it kind of keeps.
Depends. If they are a business owner, yes. If they're not a business owner, then the worst they may owe, generally if they're employed, is maybe some income tax if they haven't filed. Okay, and we can deal with that. We can also deal with source deductions and HST. But it's the business owners, especially the ones who tried to get through the pandemic and make sure that their employees got paid and their doors were open, who've been stuck with not paying. They financed their way through that by not paying HST and source deductions.
Oh,
yes. And frankly, source deductions are the most difficult because they form a priority on all other debt and assets in the bankrupt's possession. But CRA let that go for years because politically they were told back off because, everybody's hurting. So 2003, 2004, they started pressing. And we've got companies and we've got individuals who are saddled with this debt now. And we get a lot of individuals calling us, say, okay, my company owes $150,000, $200,000, and even $700,000 in source deduction.
Source deduction.
Yeah, and or HST.
It's a large company, so.
Well, not really.
That's
it can just be a restaurant, right?
Oh, and it could be years.
Because it's so labor intensive. So we look at it and, okay, what are you doing with your company? Can we keep it going? The answer is no, it's done. And I close the doors, or I will close the doors. Okay, well then, can you bankrupt my company? There's not much in the way of assets generally for a restaurant, right? Some tables, chairs, the restaurant equipment you can't get much for. So
hood fans tied to the building.
We, as a trustee, do not encourage business owners to bankrupt the corporations. Why? I don't want to take $15,000 from them personally to pay for the trustee fees for the corporation. And we're constantly running into business owners who are contacting us, say, well, I went to this trustee and he wants me to bankrupt our company and it's going to cost me this and that. And no, you have a problem. You are a director and you therefore are responsible for the HST and the source deductions, and you have that personal responsibility. Now, maybe we can do a proposal for you. And maybe we do deals with CRA all the time, and they've been very good and very understanding. They're very difficult to deal with, though, of course, because they're hard to get a hold of sometimes, and the coordination, communication is difficult. But, they're human beings too, and we run into many who are very understanding and work with us throughout all this. And, the thing is, every situation is different and personal, right? And that's what we have to do. We have to get down and into the weeds with everybody to find out what are their debts, what's the nature of their debts, what's their family situation, what's their monthly nut that they've got to be able to pay their rent, their mortgage, their food, their energy, whatever they've got to cover. But the most important thing is, what are they going to do going forward? I'm not worried about how they got there because most of the people we deal with are very honest, and they got there because of circumstances and events and whatever. What are you going to do for the future? And that's what we're pressed to, because I believe in tough love. Very simple stuff. I learned this from my mother. Be happy or else. And get over it. Get over it. Yeah, okay. You got a financial problem, and we're going to solve it, but get over it and concentrate on the rest of your life. One of my favorites was a lady. She was in my office with her husband, and she was crying because they were in their 60s, and she had gambled away their house. She had a gambling addiction.
Yeah.
And I looked at her and I said, well, I don't want to take your bankruptcy simply because this man this wonderful man you're sitting beside has forgiven you. He didn't know this before they came in, you know. I said, he's forgiven you. And if you're going to be like this for the rest of his life, I'm not going to be part of that. You've got to cheer up and get over it. Otherwise, there's another trustee down the road who's miserable. You can go there and be miserable with him.
Yeah.
And that just stopped her cold. It was so good.
It's good. It was black and white.
Yeah.
It's business.
And 6 months later, she's still sending me date squares.
Yeah, it's true though.
Oh, yeah. But she didn't expect that kind of attitude. But look at
Tough luck.
the tough love. You got to get over it. And you're here for the future, and to get rid of the past, right? Get it behind you. And you're not the only one in this world who's had tough times and things you've regretted, maybe, or maybe you don't regret it because they just fell on you, right? But it happens. And you're in a situation that, okay, and I've screwed up in my life many times. So that's the one thing in our firm that we preach is we don't talk down to anybody. We are understanding and we are compassionate, or else. That's it. You know, it's we don't tolerate people here. I had one employee with me in 1986 who went to one of my competitors, and people used to come over to our place shaking their heads, having gone there first, and couldn't believe the attitude they got. And I just went, okay, that's great. It's good for my business.
Yes,
I'm very happy. I was going to send the guy flowers or something. But keep up the good work.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, and it's, you know, it's just that we just don't tolerate arrogance in our place, you know, and it's part of our culture, and it's my culture. That's the nice thing about being the sole owner of the business. Now, to give credit, Paul Salewski, my partner for 37 years, I mean, he had this too, and we built this place together. He retired January 31, 2022. He'd had a stroke 5 years ago and then just couldn't keep it up. So, but, you know, I'm truly blessed to have someone with me for 37 years.
Of course. 37 years is a long time for a partnership.
Yeah, it's hard, you know, but we're through thick and thin and a lot of files and tens of thousands of individuals, right? If you look over, you know, 29 years now we're being in business, July 1. So that's a lot of people to deal with and a lot of situations,
Of course.
to remedy and solve. And another old story, I remember sitting outside in my car. I had our dog in for medical care and just waiting. The knock came on my window and I rolled it down. He said, Mr. Doyle, you don't know me, but I was a client and went through your program, and I just want to thank you very much because my life has been changed wonderfully, you know, since I cleared off my debt and we have a future. Oh, isn't that nice? That's just before Christmas. Isn't that nice?
That's a good one.
So anyways, I got the dog and went up to the Canadian Tire in Arnprior and was walking down the aisle, and a lady who was a clerk there in Canadian Tire came up to me and gave me a hug and thanked me because she'd been through our program and was very thankful that she was clear of debt, particularly for this particular Christmas. And I'm going, wow, oh, this is great.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. But I have people coming up to me in Costco and just noting, and the biggest thing is that if there's a comment or complaint is that they hadn't seen us 2 years before the fact, right?
Yeah.
Simply because we could have helped. We could have stopped 2 years of guilt and pressure from creditors. We could have made the resolution simpler. And sometimes they make mistakes in terms of their assets and doing whatever. And of course, we love to run them through proposals, not bankruptcies, right? So the easier it is to do a proposal, the better. And sometimes they're preferring certain creditors over others, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, for example, in a business, which is very clear, they'll not pay their Canada Revenue Agency source deductions. And they'll
The person you pay.
pay off the creditors, which is good as long as you can afford to keep doing that. But if you end up with low creditor balances and a high CRA debt, CRA will close you down ultimately. And that's what's happened to a lot of people and why we see them these days with, you know, $100,000, $500,000, $750,000 in government debt. So
I'll touch on that just so people understand. CRA doesn't need to go through the same courts. They go through like a debt court, right? So like they go through their own court. They could just go close your bank account or put a lien on your property.
They don't have to go to court to do that.
There's like their own.
Well, they have the Income Tax Act.
The income tax, yeah.
And they have a right to garnish your bank account, seize your bank account, and if you're in a business, they can come in and do whatever. But they still have a problem in that they cannot sell your assets because they don't have a right to convey title. Only a trustee can do that. So, and also they are politically motivated. So there is a certain reluctance to act in certain cases today. In fact, I've got one right now where this particular business, it has about 60 employees. We've done a proposal for them, which was accepted by the creditors 2 years ago, but they still owe source deductions of about $900,000. And again, 60 employees. But we've been working with CRA and they've been understanding and reasonable, and there is a program to pay them off. And so even though that money has been owing for a long time, but they don't want to put 60 people out of business, out of work.
Just so the viewers at home know, so source deductions, when some people don't notice in other countries, but in Canada, there's a source deduction. So it's when your paycheck comes in, there's a part of your paycheck that comes out that goes towards taxes and EI or EI, and the employer matches these source deductions at a certain percentage. I think 2.4.
Yeah, but it's the deductions for income tax that the employer takes off from the payroll. So if you, let's say you make $4,000 a month, they take the $1,000 off for tax, which they're supposed to remit every month, the following month, to the government as your tax withholding. So when you file your tax return at the end of the year, you get a T4, which says your salary was, let's say you make $4,000 a month, they take the $1,000 off for tax, which they're supposed to remit every month, the following month, to the government as your tax withholding. So when you file your tax return at the end of the year, you get a T4, which says your salary was, well, if it was $4,000, you get 48,000 a year, but you've remitted 12 grand, and that's on your T4 that, your source deductions were 12 grand. But even if your company doesn't remit, you still get credit for the 12 grand, right?
Yes.
And the company owes CRA the 12 grand, and it accrues interest, right? Every month.
Yeah, it's like doing the 15th of the following month, if I remember.
Following month, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is where the corporations are running into trouble when they run out of cash and they can't pay their wages or can't pay their rent or can't do this or that. They start not paying the government because there's no government enforcement on a monthly basis to do this, right? And of course, because of the political situation, the pandemic, the government has backed off collecting 2021, 22, 23, and they started collecting now, the last year and a half, I guess, and they've put the pressure on. And you're seeing a lot of business owners coming to see us and, well, my business is kaput. And a lot of restaurants are failing right now, too. A lot of restaurants are in deep trouble because of a lack of business. And, the pandemic started that, remote working started that. And now, now consumers are out of money. So they're spending less discretionary income at restaurants, right? So we're seeing that overall. And yes, some restaurants at the upper end are thriving. Okay. But at the lower end, yeah, they're having their problems. And we're seeing this in the States too, because we've seen several major chains file bankruptcy in the States, right? And
large like restaurant chains.
yes.
Okay. That's oh yeah, I heard Red Lobster.
Yeah, Red Lobster.
Red Lobster's a huge chain.
Yeah, that's right.
I think in the U.S. had to file.
They're gone.
They're gone. Yes, and that's I remember my whole life there was a Red Lobster.
What?
So it's funny. A lot of my parents' generation love Red Lobster. That's like a nice spot. Yeah, that's true. Big restaurants with huge brand names and they're under. So you can't if they can't survive. Who's surviving out there? Well, restaurants.
Olive Garden.
Olive Garden's still up? Are they? Yeah. Okay.
Right where you go. Olive Garden.
Yeah. Olive Garden, they're still up. Okay, so they're still good. That's the thing is like a lot of people have to understand it's the last thing someone's gonna do is go out spending $100 on a couple, for two with a bowl of pasta, half a glass of wine, and they could just stay home and have some pot, So a lot of people are just choosing to stay home. So the restaurants get hit hard, and the low end, like you said, it's kind of weird because the high end, they're going to be fine. They got their regulars who get huge salaries. So like the 5-star steakhouse is still going to be, he's still fine because he's good. He's probably owns the building as well. But the new burger joint that's giving out specials 2-for-1 burgers, he's going to have a rough time because where's the profit? You got to pay the guy $20 an hour. You got to pay EI or your source deductions. Then you got to pay the hood fan that costs 40 grand. Then you got to pay the insurance of the building. So there's a lot of pressure on the business owners. So you're seeing a lot of business owners, and they put everything on the line, and when they fail, it's kind of sad. I don't care what it is. Even if I don't like the guy, you kind of feel bad. You're like, oh, that sucks. Another one, everyone bites the dust type of thing. Another thing you touched on was so the Revenue Canada can put a lien because they have their own act, the CRA Act, and when they put a lien, they could put a lien on your home, right? It depends if you're married or not married.
It is a personal debt, yeah.
It's the personal debt.
Yeah, but if you owe the money on the business, they can't attach your home until they've gone through the process of demanding on you as a director and et cetera, et cetera. So
there's more steps too.
Yeah, there's more steps. It's not often they will lien for a director's debt, but if you owe income tax, if you are in business for yourself, a proprietorship, and you owe HST or source deductions, yes, then they can lien your house, right? And that's the big thing with income taxes, about seeing us sooner than later, because a lot of people will call us up, oh, CRA just liened my house. Oh, God, really? No. Because we can stop CRA from liening. But once they lien, they're then secured on the property and they have rights over the property, and we can't stop that.
Very hard to negotiate when you got a gun to your head.
Yeah.
And they already got it.
And it's a loaded gun.
It's a loaded gun, yeah.
So we could file a proposal, for example, and that stops them from any further action. It's just called the stay of proceedings. And that works on all creditors if you're filing a proposal. No more litigation, no more credit collection. And particularly in a consumer proposal, because if you get 50% of the creditors who vote to vote positively for the proposal, it binds everybody, including CRA.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but if it's a reasonable proposal based on a person's budget, family situation, CRA usually goes along with it.
So there's a vote system to it. So let's say you owe 10 creditors. 5 of them agree they're okay with this price. The other 5 have to take it. So 50%.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Of the dollar value.
Of the dollar value. Okay.
But also it's of those who vote as well, because they don't all vote, right? All of them aren't necessarily organized to immediately respond and vote within the 45-day period.
Okay. So I understand now. So it's an amount. So it's 50% of the dollar amount. So if there's $100,000 owed, $50,000 of what is owed.
We'll make it 50,000 plus one.
Plus one. $50,001 would have to vote for in favor. So
if 100,000 vote, but maybe it's only $60,000 a vote.
Is there a lot of back and forth in that? But
there can be negotiating, and we work with the creditors and the customer to make sure that we try and get the best deal possible for both parties.
Yeah.
And the big thing is that we don't work just for the customer. We're a court officer, which is hard to understand, so that we are appointed to act in the best interest of all stakeholders. All stakeholders include creditors and the debtor. But our first duty when someone calls us is the remediation of the individual financially. We want to see them back on their feet. So we try and craft the best possible solution so they're back in doing whatever they're doing and they're not being harassed by creditors anymore. They have a payment plan, they have a budget, and we know that they can pay us over, usually it's 5 years, interest-free, no interest. And usually with a forgiveness of debt too. I mean, we've had forgiveness of debt of huge amounts, depending on a person's situation, if it was reasonable. I even had one fellow in Windsor. He was so well liked by his creditors, they just forgave all of his debt. Can you imagine? It was wonderful.
That's pretty good.
Oh yeah, yeah. But they understood what the guy went through, and I guess he was a neighbor and friend to a lot of these people, and it was.
Those are honest, like on
Yeah, that happens.
I bet most of your clients is under extreme circumstances, or it's not just bad people all the time.
No. I say we got well north of 85% of the people who speak to us are honest but unfortunate debtors, right? That's how you typify them in the act. But it's I mean, they're people, right?
Yeah, of course.
They're your neighbors, your friends, your family, and we all run into, call it bad luck, circumstances, and we make mistakes, we screw up, and that's fine. And that's why when someone starts giving me, oh, this is how I really
We've seen it all.
yeah, I don't need to hear the past. What we're here for is your future. Are you working? Have you got an income? Can we pay this off over a period of time?
Need the truth.
How's your wife? How's your kids? You know, and it's got to be reasonable, all right? And we try to make a reasonable situation out of the whole. And what the creditors, I guess, appreciate, if they're going to appreciate this, so certainly they're not happy with the interference by a court officer to say, okay, put the brakes on, creditors, is we look at the individual's budget. And honestly, we assess. I'm a chartered accountant. I'm a forensic accountant too. So when we do a budget for somebody and they're honest with us, that's the deal.
Yeah.
You know, we look at their pay stub, we look at their disbursements, we review a budget with them and see how much is left before paying debt. And based on that, how much can we afford to pay creditors over a period of 60 months? Or maybe you can borrow an amount of money from a friend or a family member, and let's say you owe 100 grand. Can you borrow 50? And we'll get the other 50 paid off. And if this 50 can come in within a few days or a few months of this approval from the creditors, that'll be it. We get it done when the person's in and out of the process in 3-4 months. And we've done that before too. I had one guy, he owed 25 million and his mother lent him 25,000 and we got it done. Well, what's he going to do? It's going to be a bankruptcy. They're going to get nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Or would they like the 25 grand? I mean,
Or something.
as long as they are willing to believe the debtor's situation and of course the credibility of the trustee who's doing the work, right? Because
That matters.
excuse me, if the trustee's feeding them nonsense numbers, obviously the creditor's going to be very upset with that. The creditors want the financial information, right? Because they usually haven't seen it in this light before. They're dealing with the original application, which might be 5 years old or longer. Other things which pop up, which are very important, a lot of people don't recognize, is that they have liabilities for corporate credit cards. If the corporation goes under and they have a American Express or Visa and it says their name on the card as well as the corporation, they've probably signed as a co-borrower or a guarantor, and they're stuck with that. The second thing is when they applied for their own personal credit card, did a family member or a spouse also sign as a co-borrower or guarantor of that amount? That's one thing that a lot of people leave off and forget about.
Mortgages too.
Yeah.
Mortgages as well. Some people
Yes.
co-sign for their.
Yeah, but the mortgage usually is taken care of. I mean, the mortgage can be taken care of in the
sale.
in the sale, or we always try to keep people in their house if it makes sense.
Yes.
It's 99% of the time it makes sense, but occasionally I run into a situation where someone's living in a very expensive house.
$2 million home, they should be living in a 500,000.
Yeah, and it just, and they're carrying a huge mortgage, and really, but I love my house. Yeah, I love your house too, but you can't afford it really in this, this world of today particularly. And we know this year, CMHC has warned us that a majority of mortgage holders will see their mortgages coming due this year and reissued at higher rates.
Yes.
So we know more people are now going to get squeezed who are homeowners, right?
Especially if you add the inflation with the food and the utilities and fuel for your vehicle, insurance,
That's right.
items wrong. Then you're going to add people who have 2% rates are going to go around the 4% rates. That's double the rate. So it's going to, and then their consumer debt. It's going to be a strange 2 years coming up. And I wanted to like put in a plug. So just so everyone knows, Brian was explaining to people the best time is to give them a call before it's too late. So not the last minute when you already have the lien on the house. If you call a year before, 2 years before, he'll take anybody's call. It's a free service. There's no obligation. It's a free service to take the call and background, a chartered accountant, forensic accountant. You have professionals, you have consultants, he has a team of 34 people who'll talk to you and you'll be a lot more relaxed. And at the end, surprising your wife or your husband with, hey, I have gambling problems or whatever it is. So if you find out years before, the best thing to do is call them, be honest, so it's not too late. Because that's the last thing you want to hear is, I have a lien on my house, I didn't pay my HST, I don't know, I have a $3,000, $4,000 car payment that I can't afford, and you're like, well, you should have returned the car 2 years ago. You should, So there's a step. So just feel comfortable. It's not you're not in trouble. You can call them anytime, and they'll be happy to help, which will make your future self thank you.
So I had the mother of one of our business clients call me, and I spent a half an hour with her on Zoom. It was very, very nice. A nice lady, but she's a widow. Her husband passed away 2-3 years ago. And she owns 2 rental properties, but she has, let me just guess now, $100,000 in credit card debts and unsecured debts. And they're pressing because she doesn't have enough cash flow to service them and her living needs, and of course the mortgage on the place that she's living in. So of the 2 rental properties, one is just barely breaking even, but it has equity. So I said, why did you sell that and get the equity and pay these off? Well, I was supposed to be part of my retirement. Yeah, but you need to get that money in now, get these people off your back. Well, they're pressing now and they're threatening to take my bank. I said, okay, call them up, tell them you're going to sell this property. Don't tell them where the property is. They might lien it. Tell them you're talking to me, a bankruptcy trustee, okay? That'll scare them. And let them know that, push comes to shove, you're going to have to file, and they're probably going to get nothing. Now, that may be false information.
Could be a bluff, but yeah.
Could be a bluff, but all they have to do is back off, and they'll be paid in full. Just give you time to sell that one property. It's going to take a few months, yeah. But, give them my personal phone number, and they take my phone number, and I will not give them the details because that's confidential, but I will, with your permission, admit that I've talked to you, okay, so that you end up with some credibility there, and they know that you've talked to Brian Doyle and Doyle Salewski, and they know us out there, so it's not a problem. And that seems to work quite a few times.
That's true, that's good. And also on the creditor side, they'll feel better.
Yeah,
because
they'll see
like, oh, they want to go see someone like Brian. Yeah. They're not just avoiding my calls, or they're not just not doing anything about it. Because last thing you want to hear is someone who owes you money just avoiding you type of thing. Yeah. So that makes them probably at ease at the same time.
Right.
And that's good. So in this market, it takes time to sell a home. This is not 2021 or 2022, right? So it takes time to sell a home. Have you noticed speaking about home selling, have you noticed any of your clients buy a home during a seller's market, and now they can't sell it at the price they bought it for, or they've lost their equity? Have you noticed anything like that? I've heard that in Toronto, the condo markets are getting crushed, and you're seeing that as well?
Well, the real estate market is a shit show, to be blunt. And the condo market you refer to, Toronto, Vancouver particularly, it's terrible. I mean, the purchasers are bailing out of their contracts all over the place. And I knew this 2 years ago. I had a lawyer from Toronto, I think his name is Morris, on my macroeconomic call one day. one Wednesday, and he was seeing then it starting, right, when he knew it was coming. So we could see this. People just can't afford to close, and they've got no equity, they've got a loss in their hands. So all they're saying to the developer is, sue me. And the developer's looking at their bank going, well, I had all these pre-sales, but they're gone now. What do we do? So they're all in trouble. The other big foobar is multi-residential throughout Ontario. And there has been a CCAA filing a year ago, April, by a company called Balboa Inc., Happy Valley, and run by 4 individuals. And it's in the papers. You can Google it.
Yes.
And they were funded by a company called Lionshare, is a mortgage broker who solicited promissory notes, unsecured debt from Halifax through to Victoria. And they went bankrupt a year ago for $89 million. So there is...
That's horrible.
Well in excess of 400 multi-res, which are, you know, triplexes, duplexes, quadruplexes, etc., in the secondary market, Sault Ste. Marie, Welland, Brantford, etc., etc. And they did the CCAA, and the monitor came back and said, there's no equity in there. There's nothing for the unsecured investors. Huge. So all these individuals are feeling the sting of not getting anything for their 50, 100, 150, 200,000 that they put in. They're getting nothing. And so...
The lawsuit's online for that one.
I've got another client with another company who actually I was talking to today. She had bought multi-res into Sault Ste. Marie, for example, and she can't sell them because of this glut of multi-res for sale from this Balboa Inc. And it was several companies that this particular group had going. And it was written up in, I think, the Globe or CBC about the private jets, the parties, and everything else this group were having. I mean, totally lacked administration and totally lived a great and reckless life, call it that, to be polite. So it's a huge insolvency, which is for many people under the radar, but it's under the, of course, the multi-res market. So you got the multi-res, you got the condos, and single-family res is, it's all declined in price, right? So there are people out there that are trapped, no doubt. But I don't know what mortgage companies are doing for the most part, if they're behind, but people will strive to keep their mortgages current because they want to keep their kids in the house, et cetera, and they'll load up their credit cards. And that's why we're seeing so many people in the door now with equity in their houses, but $100,000, $150,000 of credit card debt, right?
We've had somebody call us, a previous client, you know, unforeseen circumstances. They racked up some debt. I think there was a death in the family, and one of the spouses was working, the other one wasn't. They had big new kids, daycare, maybe hockey, you know, the whole bit. But they used their credit cards and lines of credit to keep their lifestyle going.
Yep.
And, you know, car loans, and then it went to like 80 or 90,000. And they're both government employees making, let's say, $250,000 a year, and they're thinking about seeing a trustee or bankrupt, either bankrupt or getting a proposal. And they called me to ask me my advice. I said, no, you should just refinance your rental, because they had a rental in their house. I'm like, refinance your rental and just pay it off, you know, instead of you're not there yet. Like,
yeah, that's right.
So he did it, but it's happening a lot where people can't afford it. You said 28% is average credit card. You put 28% on $100,000. $28,000 is very hard to afford after tax dollars.
In 1 year.
In one year.
I mean, look at what most people make, right? And that's $28,000 after tax you're paying, right? For the most part. So
very, very expensive.
Huge.
There was something, I know it has nothing to do with Canada, but there was something in the US, they were trying to pass something where credit cards are going to be maxed at a certain percentage, so they can't hit the 30% range. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know if that's going to solve that or anything, because people will just borrow.
Well, they just did something in Canada with payday loans and capping their interest rates I'm not totally conversant with that, but you know, I certainly welcome the news, and I'm not sure where that is in the scheme of things with everything that has been chaos in our political system over the last 6 months.
Oh yeah, doing
So, oh yeah, and you know, Parliament hasn't been in to be able to pass a lot of the acts that are sitting out there. So, but yeah, I mean, people come into us with payday loans. We've never seen so many. And the interest rates, they just don't read the fine print, right? And once they make one missed payment, whoops, up goes their interest rate substantially. It could be 45%. And as long as they're not over 60%, which is the rate of usury, and I know the rate of usury because I was the first one to achieve convictions under the act back in 1990. I got a particular individual charged with 18 counts of usury, and my latest was with Golden Oaks, which was a Ponzi scheme here in Ottawa, and they had issued $28 million of promissory notes over a number of years, interest rates which went from a reasonable 5, 6, 8, 10% up to 6,000% and more. And it was just huge. Most of them were at 200 to 400% interest. So this is how this, call him a Ponzi master, was operating and getting money in, robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. And
a pyramid scheme, sort of like.
And finally it blew up, like all Ponzi schemes, right?
Yeah.
It finally blew up. But yeah, so
I've heard of the name. That's not long ago than that company.
No, it was 2013, and I won my case at the Supreme Court of Canada. The decision came out last October, so 7-0. I mean, we don't like losing.
No, it's good. Well, it's good. You make it fair, right? It's not fair when
well, but people shouldn't engage in this too good to be true stuff. Call it that, right?
Yes.
And should stick to fundamentals, and then you won't get into trouble. But people are so attracted by quick profits. And the biggest problem we see now are people who got into real estate in the last 5 years, particularly 5, 6 years. And yeah, some people made a lot of money, but then they were in there and real estate has come down. And I've had to step in and done several restructurings, which have worked out very nicely, thank you. I appreciate the business, but you know, when you look at it, you shouldn't have been in this game. Because there's a lot of unknowledgeable people who've been looking at the headlines and seeing the fast money and the gains, who really aren't aware of the pitfalls in real estate investment. And I've lost money in real estate, and I've made money in real estate, but you've got to be able to afford it and afford to take the hit. And a lot of the people who invest were very naive and trusting people. And that's the biggest problem we've got now with the internet, is people trusting people who are crooks. And even in this business, this insolvency business, the trustee business now, we've had a run of debt consultants overseas who've been luring people into remediation of their debts. And people are willing to pay outrageous sums of money on the basis of promises over a telephone or a Zoom call.
So they invest in businesses outside?
No, there's not investments. So someone has $100,000 of credit card debt, and they answer a invitation on the internet, and save up to 80% of your credit card, and they end up speaking to somebody in India or somebody in the Dominican Republic who talks them into sending them money. And we've got people who buy into just the craziest of things. I had one woman down in Brockville. She ended up being a client of ours, but she called up because she had put money into a crypto bank in California. I said, that's ridiculous.
How old is she?
Oh, she's 50s, 60s, I think 50s. And I said, give me their number. So I phoned them up. They were going to put her in jail because she wasn't continuing to contribute to the bank.
Well, they told her.
Yeah, and they're from California. And I said, good luck to that. You're Canadian. How the hell are they going to do that? Yeah. And So I called up, and the first red flag was the Chinese accent that the fellow answered the phone with. Really? And then he started calling me a crook. And that was kind of the end of the call.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because really.
You know, yeah.
And so I had her, and she still had trouble believing me. Okay? She had trouble believing me. And that's not unusual. I ran an investor fraud seminar in 1990-91 here in Ottawa. I had 900 people attending. Unfortunately, very few investors attended. It was mostly police officers, lawyers, and accountants, and bankers, right? Great turnout from the professional community. But investors, they just weren't willing to pay the $50 to come and listen. We had like 10 hours of speakers. And I think one of the best was a Crown attorney from down in the States. She flew up for this, and she talked about how investors just refuse to accept the truth and will even go to visit their Ponzi scheme masters and perpetrators in jail because they're saying, oh no, I've been wrongly prosecuted, and blah, and they believe them. And I know when I did the, was it the Lacasse Enterprises situation, 91, 92, there was a lady in Victoria, Vancouver, just refused to believe Detective Sergeant Robert Whitsitt, who head of the OPP anti-racket squad. He was working with me on the case at the time, and she refused to believe him that she was involved in a criminal scheme. And it was, maybe 2 years later, she finally came to grips with it, right? And there was even a police officer that had invested in this thing. But his reaction to Pat Lindberner, he was special investigator for the Ministry of Financial Institutions, a friend of mine. And Pat's a former Toronto cop as well. So this was an Ottawa cop who just said to him, I can't stop. I've got my money invested in this, and if I stop, I'll lose my whole investment. Pat's kind of shrugging his shoulders, and, so the guy was still supporting it, maybe even financially, by continuing to pay, right? And Pat couldn't talk him out of it, right? Because the guy was trapped, and he was going to lose the whole thing, et cetera.
He's like denying to himself.
Yeah, it's just, people get involved, and they just don't see a way out, and sometimes they don't realize they may have lost a lot of money, but they were, don't continue, you're going to lose more, right?
There's a thing with victims don't like to talk about them being victims too. So them not talking about it or not calling the authorities makes it worse.
Yeah.
And if you're getting, just so you're aware, if you're getting anything over 10%, it's risky, or even over 8%. So if somebody offers you an investment at 8, 10, 12, 15, whatever it is, there is investments that do give these returns. Okay, yes, there's real estate that do give these returns, but they're not guaranteed, and they are high risk. Just remember that. So if somebody comes to you and walks over to you and say, I got a friend making 12 or 14, it is, and ask them, is it risky? And if they don't say yes right away, then there's something weird. They're selling to you, because
Usually they'll say it's a sure bet. It's guaranteed.
No, this is impossible.
It's guaranteed. Yeah,
If it was possible, if it was a sure thing, we'd all be doing it. You would all be taking our grandma's money and putting it in. So just so you're aware, if somebody says so you can make 12% or 18% or whatever these percentages are, if it's not a normal S&P or whatever you could see online, if it's not even that, even S&P is not guaranteed. So if somebody tells you that it's 12%, and you can ask them, look at them in the eyes and say, is it risky? Even though I'm telling you it is risky and know that it is risky, their reaction should say, yes, it is risky. If they say no, they're selling, and it's a very dishonest thing for them to say, because even if they are investing in it, it is risky on their end. There's no sure thing at 13% or 12%. This is not, a bond is maybe an investment that you're guaranteed on, a government bond. But that's what I don't like, is that some people say, oh, I can make it 12%. And then the next reaction, you have a doctor who's worked his whole life to save money, and he's like, is it risky? The reaction should say yes. Even if you want them still as your customer, you should be honest and say yes, and you're going to sign some papers that says I've given you the Riot Act. Smoking cigarettes is risky, and the cigarette company puts a picture of somebody with like lung cancer on it, because they know there's a risk of smoking cigarettes. The same thing when it comes to investing. You should be looking at it like a pack of cigarettes. You know what you're buying. It should not be a surprise. Oh, I thought it was guaranteed 50% or 6,000% was the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually if we did the actuarial calculations, which are provable in court, we added one calculation at 67,000%.
67,000% is impossible. It's
Amazing. Well, it's just, lend me 10 grand and I'll give you back 20 next week. I mean, that's interest rates are calculated on an annualized basis, right? And an actuary will then do the whole thing and come up with a fantastic number. If you're, like I'm going to give you 10 grand now, and in 2 weeks, you're going to give me back 20. And really,
just calculate how many hours it takes to make 10 grand and then deduct your source deductions off of it. And you'll realize investing 10 grand. You know what drives me nuts is the online investment gurus.
Yeah.
They'll tell people buy Pokemon cards and buy Bitcoin and buy, and you're like, what is everyone doing? Or they have courses how to make money, which is fine. There is courses for that, but how they actually make money is the courses, not actually the item. And what's sad is that usually it's people borrowing off their credit cards to do it. I don't know.
Right. They borrow and they end up with nothing for their investment, and then they got this debt to pay off.
Yes.
Right.
Or they got their family's money involved.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, people who are designers of Ponzi schemes at the end often pillage the family's money, their own family's money. And that happens because they're so desperate to keep the ball rolling, and they don't want the consequence of failure, right? So they're willing to risk anything and anybody's money, including their mother's, right? So
that's super scary stuff.
Yeah.
And I want everyone to know how lucky they are that in North America, that I know, in North America, you can see someone like Brian, you did a mistake, and they'll help you get out of it. You go to places in Asia or the Middle East or Africa or Eastern Europe, you write one bad check, you go to jail. Maybe one you can say it was an honest mistake, the way your bank account work, but in some places you don't pay your debts. You go to jail for this. You can be imprisoned. There was a thing that I saw in Dubai where there's after the 2008 crash, or there's a crash, there was fancy cars everywhere on the road. Like Lamborghinis, because they just left, took the next plane ticket and got out of there. They just left the car, or they left their very fancy, because they're going to go to jail if they stay. If you don't. So in North America, we're very lucky that there is this law that protects you. It's called, it's a poor law? Is that what it's called?
Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act?
Yeah.
And then there's the Execution Act in every province, which, notwithstanding everything else, you are allowed to keep a certain amount of your assets. They can't take that away from you. Yeah. And that's so that you have something, right? Whether it's, your personal effects, and your even $10,000 equity on your house now is allowed. Plus, it's all approaching $7,000 on a vehicle. So they can't seize a vehicle worth $6,000.
That's another thing. Have you seen a lot of vehicles at the 20%, 30% interest rates?
No, the subprime market is out there, and we deal with a lot of subprime borrowers who will send us somebody and say, this fellow, he needs a new car, but he's got a lot of debt. He needs to get straightened out. And once you get him straightened out in a proposal, have reviewed his budget, can he afford $500 a month, $600, $800 a month for this particular car? And so we'll get back to them and say, yeah, no, he's good, and we'll straighten out the debt. We'll offer it over 60 months, and if the creditors don't accept it, he'll do bankruptcy. But he still can have his car. And why does he need his car? He needs to go to work.
He needs to go put on a wall up.
With a must. He needs a car. He's ran out the other one, and it's a FUBAR now. It's done. So he's hit the wall.
When I know this sounds a bit weird putting you on the spot, but do you see a profile? Is there a typical client that you would see? Example. An example is this: the steps that they're about. They need you. They would need you. Maybe a formula, or a formula exactly for a client. So we know in lending that the bank could the bank could lower your limit at any time. For whatever reason, they feel like, oh, wait a second, this guy has an extra $100,000 of line of credit. I'm gonna lower it up to what he owes $20,000. He has a $100,000 limit. That's $80,000 of like borrowing power. They just bring it back down to $20,000 overnight. They can do that, so they feel like they don't want you to max out. Certain borrowers, they have an algorithm. The banks have the top systems to figure this out.
And they're actually canceling or reducing HELOCs now, which scares the crap out of some people, because they, all of a sudden they had maybe a $300,000 limit to borrow on their house, and now it's down to $150,000. Well, why? Because the value of your house has shrunk. That's why.
Yes.
And they're minimizing their risk, and that's across the board. Nothing reversing out. No, it's across the board. So they've got to minimize their own exposure. I even know of a bank right now that is debanking some companies because they're just saying, well, we got too much risk out there, and you are in an industry which we think is in peril given the tariffs and the way the economy is going. So we don't want to be your bank anymore. Go find a new bank. And people are in shock. Businessmen are in shock. Like, oh, where do I find a banker now? I was busy selling and doing this to keep my company afloat. Now I got to go out and look for a new bank. Oh my God.
So we noticed that too, when the banks will tell somebody, oh, your $300,000 line of HELOC, so just so our viewers at home know what a HELOC is, it's a home equity line of credit. It's a line of credit secure on the home. They're very large, and they're usually a very good price. They're usually a very good price of the line of credit. They're not like unsecured line of credit.
But they're maxed at 65% of your appraised value. That's
with banks, they're maxed at 65% loan to value. With co-ops, they can go up to 80, because bank rules and co-ops have different rules. When you get that shrunk down, there's something up. So can you tell when a profile is going to need your help? Is there something that you can tell, like if their debts are maxed out, or if they have very high car loans, or can you tell like maybe their hours are being cut? Because a lot of people for the longest time had overtime. They had like options to overtime. So they kind of relied on their overtime for 10 years. They used that. That was like their extra money. A lot of businesses have been cutting back on at least overtime. Are you noticing certain types of clients that are applying that fit a certain box when they apply, or is it just everyone is just random every time?
I think it's everyone. I mean, it's such a personal business, right? Because we have to get down to into the weeds with everyone, right? And as I keep saying, everybody's situation is different. So that's why, we have to spend, call it a few hours with each one of these people. We have application forms that have to go through, spend time with a debt relief counselor, and then overall, one of our trustees, it's usually myself or Tracy, or even my retired partner, Paul, or it could be our former senior vice president, Mark Rouleau in Quebec, for example, has to approve and go over the situation and meet the individual, either virtually or in person. So we want to make sure they're getting the right advice and all the information is there. Because when they forget something, it can really upset the apple cart.
Oh, yes.
I forgot this.
I forgot a co-sign for this, or...
Yeah. And, I forgot about this loan or that loan, or I've even had some people saying, oh, I didn't know that my car loan was debt. I had to buy my car. Well, we understand that, but it's still debt. And we have to work it into your budget, and we have to look at that in the overall scheme of your financial situation. Because you're paying a mortgage, you're paying your car, which are necessities, then you've got the unsecured debt, and you've got this, and oh, we've got a travel trailer, 26-foot travel trailer here. Oh, it's very important. We've got to use that. Okay, I understand.
The old one we didn't want anymore.
No, people who are into travel trailers, it's a religion. They've got to have them.
I know.
So, but they're expensive, and they often carry a large amount of debt on them.
And you lose value.
And they, of course they lose value,
The vehicles. I remember I asked you once, I'm like, what is something you'd like to debunk, or something you can debunk in your industry? And you mentioned that you had a client think that they can bankrupt the mortgage but keep the home.
That's right. Yeah. It was a senior citizen. Yeah, she's 78 years old. Yeah.
It's like, can I bankrupt the mortgage, but keep the home?
Keep the home, yeah.
I think your lender's gonna accept that.
Yeah. No, she didn't know that, but she has equity in the house too. So, it's a difficult situation, and she has trouble grasping. Like, really, she should have the help of a family member, and that's what we run into a lot with some senior citizens: is that a family member should be working with them to work their way through problems.
How important is to have family?
Yeah. Right now, I'm dealing with a corporation where the principal is 87 years old and hard of hearing. So, and he's made a lot of mistakes in the last 2 years with respect to his corporation, and we're just bailing it out now. It's very, very difficult. And the family should have stepped in a long time ago, frankly. But they didn't understand and they didn't know, because they aren't business people per se, right?
Another reason I should call you, you're like a financial consultant in the beginning, I guess. Or,
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, you can really help.
We take on consultancies especially with corporations and sometimes with individuals as well. But, it depends on the circumstances. Usually, we give away a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour with somebody. And I always enjoy talking to them and making a new friend, so to speak. And if you understand the situation, and they may come back in a year's time and it may have gotten worse, or they may refer somebody on to us. So it's always a good relationship building exercise for us to try and help people and not have to offer an insolvency situation. And that's why we offer your services, Danny, because
we appreciate it.
the number of people who come to talk to us, and we can give you a mortgage broker who can work you through that situation and give you a reverse mortgage. We got a guy I referred to just before the meeting. He's got no mortgage at all in his house, but he's got health problems and he's got $30,000 of debt, and they're pressing him. And I think a simple reverse mortgage to do it. And he's
Take a lot of pressure off him.
he can keep his house, and he's got equity in there. And the other thing too is that, okay, if he doesn't like that, the kids don't like that, well, they can lend him the money and put a mortgage on themselves.
Yes.
But somebody do something and get this thing cleared up, and the family's got to step in if there is a family there. I'm not sure yet, and I didn't get that far into the analysis.
And we appreciate the referrals. And what would be something like advice you would give a young Canadian just working, and like, what would you teach them about budgeting, and what would be the advice you give to young Canadians these days?
Be careful on the internet. You can get a lot of good advice on the internet, but there are a lot of pirates and thieves there. Okay. And it's so hard to tell who is your friend and who is your enemy, especially, over the phone. And that's why we broadcast that we're local, regional, and reachable. Because you can come in and see us here, at 161 Greenbank, or in our office in Gatineau, or our office on Metcalfe Street, or we have 22 associate offices throughout the provinces. I mean, talking to somebody and they're luring you into something and you don't know where they are, like, really? I've lived in the Ottawa area now for 40 years. Before that I was in Toronto. Before that I grew up in Montreal. So very much Ontario and Quebec, right? And this is our home, and we don't want to see people get screwed over, and it's tragic. And I have built a large reputation in investor fraud, as you know, and I've put 6 people in jail for being criminals, and they got hard time. The situation now in Ontario, in Burlington, Ontario, Watertown, I mean, there's a mortgage broker there who should be charged, right? And these other principals should be charged too for fraud. Because you've got, I know how many hundreds of investors who've lost hundreds of thousands of dollars each.
Promissory notes, be careful with those. Those are
like, it's ridiculous. And they were told certain things. And I've got the clear fraud on all of that. It's clear fraud. Mm-hmm. I know fraud, I'm a certified fraud examiner, and I see the fraud. But the problem is that the Crown and the police are overtaxed, And commercial fraud is low on the totem pole, so to speak, right? And you've got to be dealing with the criminals on the streets as opposed to the white-collar crime that happens, because there's no blood necessarily in white-collar crime,
Non-violent,
right?
yeah.
Non-violent, and it's often ignored. I mean, the last conviction I got was 2010, right? And the guy got 6 years. But now,
It's hard to get them.
hard to get them, you know, and the police are so overwhelmed and overtaxed. And I know that I can issue investigation orders under I can issue requests for investigation orders under the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act, and I do that. But I don't get answers on them now. And I think it's very sad. And, it's down to investor beware. You know, just be careful out there, because, as I said, there's a lot of good information on the internet, and even with AI. But even AI can give you bad information and mislead you, and you could lose your money. Just be very careful. And, when you're talking 12, 14%, yeah, a mortgage, you can get a mortgage for that. Okay. But you better make damn sure you're dealing with a responsible lawyer who can do a very good property search, and you get a proper appraisal on the property, and you know what you're investing in. You've got to know what you're doing. But when you're naive and inexperienced, boy, you're setting yourself up for failure.
You don't even know how the exit strategy is going to be. You don't know any. You don't know the right questions to ask.
Yeah. And Danny, mortgage brokers, like I've prosecuted, investigated mortgage brokers, as you know, and that's why I deal with you. You're a responsible guy, as far as I know. I haven't seen the black mark on you yet.
Appreciate it.
And I have other mortgage brokers that I deal with, but there are mortgage brokers in Ontario right now who should be prosecuted for fraud.
Yeah, they're giving the industry a bad rep.
Oh yeah. And back in the early 90s, we were retained by the Ministry of Financial Institutions to deal with several mortgage brokers who had gone sideways. And, the largest one I had was $100 million. And it was local, very, very much in the news. And we resolved that very credibly. I'm very happy with the resolution. We had a lot of participation from local professionals. But, mortgage brokers, they can be with a reputable firm and then leave and then go sideways, right? And lure because they establish relationships. And I remember with the conviction in 2010, the investors there, the saddest part were some of the investors who said, not only did I lose my life savings, I also lost my best friend, because the Ponzi master, the crook,
Everyone's friend.
was everybody's buddy, right? Of course. And
All the hockey games, barbecue, golfing. Usually they do a lot of golfing.
and they couldn't believe the lies when they first came out, right? And and it's sad, but that's the way. That's human nature, right? That's human nature, and people have to be aware that they could get sucked into a situation they're just not expecting, and very sad.
On that note, thank you so much for being on our podcast. I really appreciate it. Hope to have you back. Hope you had fun. Thanks, everybody. And if you want to reach out, can you give your plug, like your phone number, a website, the whole bit, just so
Sure, it's www.doylesalewski.ca, SALEWSKI, and I hope you know how to spell Doyle with a D. 613-237-5555.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. And again, if you're feeling a pinch and don't wait. Do the call right away, because last thing you want to do is time will make it worse if you don't get to it as soon as possible.